Hello again, this is Jason Titcomb from LMGI. Remember where we left off last time? We were going through some of the sketch commands. We're going to continue with that. You might recall we were going to maybe draw this little sketch shape that would be part of your fundamentals activity course. I'm going to go ahead and just select all of this and delete it. I want to show you a couple of settings before we go too far that I think are really need to know. Under the Inspect tab, you'll see this relationship colors. Now, I'll show you what that does in a moment, but that's a default you probably want to turn on, and this button should stay in for you across multiple files and multiple days. If not, just remember that one. That's a really important one. And then under the IntelliSketch options, tiny little button up here has a wicked cool setting in it called Auto Dimension. We've already talked a little bit about some of these. These are essentially key point snaps that can be located. One that you may turn on from time to time is Silhouette. You see a number of them here, but you also see them here in the user interface. So these are the same settings, just they sprinkled a few on the toolbar, and there's more advanced settings here. But the one that is really important to know about is auto dimensioning. You see I have mine set. When I actually bang in a number as I'm drawing, it will create a dimension for me. So dimensions are important because they control the geometry, and you can also retrieve those dimensions in drafting and essentially get them for free. Though they may not be perfectly pretty in drafting, you can very easily manipulate them to make them perfect. And we'll just go ahead and hit OK. And remember, we're going to draw a shape like this. So any 2 or 3 different users might come up with different ways to create this shape. I'm going to go ahead and maybe make a rectangle 70 by 50. So let's do a rectangle by center, and I'm going to do 50, and I'm going to type tab. It moves me to the next field, 70, and tab, and then the angle is 0, so I'm just going to press enter. So you see I got dimensions for free, which is a really nice feature. So I'm going to continue, and as a result of the rectangle by center, we have some horizontal vertical relationships created here. I'll talk more about that. And notice it is black, so meaning that it's fully controlled via these horizontal and vertical constraints combined with the red driving dimensions. This geometry cannot be modified accidentally by clicking and dragging it. If I grab it by a handle, it will not move. I have to change a dimension to make an edit to it. So let's continue with our little shape. I'm just going to kind of draw visually and randomly, but I'm going to focus on getting things kind of square by using my IntelliSketch, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. This is a really productive workflow, I believe. So, and notice that those elements are blue. So we can manually apply a horizontal relationship. This time go between key point and the center. Creates a horizontal alignment, so we know that is exactly on center. And then maybe I try to use smart dimensioning. It should be probably your first choice. It can do so much dimensioning that it's occasionally you'll find some tricky dimension you can't do, and you may want to switch to distance between. But Smart Dimension is a killer dimensioning tool. So I'm going to place this, and then I'm going to immediately start typing to give it the exact value that I want. And it looks like we need a 15, so I'm going to go from here to here. And you can see just by moving the mouse, I kind of just wave it around on the screen, and immediately you'll see the orientation of the dimension that you want. And again, this may not be the way you would draw it, but it's the way they dimensioned it in the activity. And then we have one extra little element in here, and then we can go ahead and trim that. So you have a trim and extend. We might talk about this a little bit more. The trim tool removes elements. The extend joins elements that have gaps. So if I choose trim, and I like if I click the left mouse down and just swipe through it at least once, it will trim that out. So notice my geometry turned blue. So somehow by deleting that geometry, it's now not fully constrained. You could certainly tug on it to try to understand how it could move, or you could just place more dimensions. But SolidEdge actually has a great tool here. This button, the Relationship Assistant, will help you see how a profile or a sketch can move. There's a couple of other buttons that may be of interest. Maintain relationships, you pretty much just want that on all the time. If you don't have that button pushed in, you won't get your relationships persisted. It probably should, you could even remove that from your toolbar and you wouldn't miss it a bit. The handles is just, this button just shows the handle. So that's kind of handy. It'll make it clean. Maybe you want to do a screenshot. Personally, I like my relationships visible all the time. But if I want to see how the variability is, there's actually a great tool, Relationship Assistant. This button is all you need to click. You just do what it says in the prompt. Simply select the geometry. Don't click the other buttons. We can talk about that later. You just click Show Variability. So look at what's going on here. So the upper and the lower, if you keep clicking it, it will randomize. So you see the width of that little feature on the right can change size. The upper and lower lines are not equal length. So you start to get a real sense for what you need to do to make this a fully controlled sketch. So I think I'm going to do an equal on this, and then I think collinear probably makes sense for this element and this element. There's probably 2 or 3 different ways you could achieve this. And then smart dimension, it looked like the width, we could either do another dimension here or put a width here. Bang, that was the last one. It all turns black, and that's now fully controlled. So that was in ordered mode. So we're going to close out and finish, and that's just a sketch. It's not an extrude. So let's undo that. Let's switch to Synchronous real quick. Remember, you draw right in the environment. So I'm going to go and I'm going to lock. I'm going to click for the center. I'm going to do 50, 70, 0, and then I'm going to do the same thing just so you can see how it's almost exactly the same. Well, it is exactly the same workflow. At any point, if I want to, I do Control H on the keyboard to bring me square to the screen. I might as well trim this now. The funny thing with Synchronous, you actually don't need to do as much trimming. It's pretty cool. Maybe I'll undo that because I've already showed you some trimming, but let's go ahead and constrain it a little bit better, and let's put a dimension on it. Maybe I'll just do one here. I'm deviating from the drawing a little bit, but that's okay. So with Synchronous, to extrude this, you simply pick the region, and I can just tap the space bar and pick another region and extrude that. And I just tapped Shift on the keyboard, but we're going to get to all that later. So you can see that made an extrusion without the extra trimming that you would normally have to do in the ordered environment, because Synchronous has the ability to just pick regions. It's very fast and productive. So that is the end of the first activity. Take a little time, kind of play around with that. We'll talk more about dimensioning. I just gave you a little taste of dimensioning, and that's the first activity.